Planning a school corporation's operating budget is not easy or quick task. Months and months of planning goes into each budget, and there's no one more aware of this than EVSC's Assistant Superintendent for Business Affairs, Dr. David Smith. Dr. Smith, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
We just saw a package on the referendum, and one of the things we discussed was, maintaining a tax rate.
Yes.
and revenues and so forth. Let's talk about that commitment. And while we said we've held strong to that, there are a lot of variables that go into that. There were some assumptions made. Why don't you talk to us about a couple of those assumptions?
Certainly. We looked back at trending for the last 10 years and saw that on average the assessed valuation grew 2.5% on an annual basis. Actually, it was greater than that. I believe it's 2.7, but being very conservative, we used a 2.5% number for the average. I believe we have a graphic on assessed valuation, what has happened with the trending on that. In 2008, the assessed valuation was $2.8 billion net AV for Vanderbilt County. When you then multiply that by 2.5% growth, we were assuming, based on the projections and the trending that had occurred, that our assessed valuation in 2011 would be $8.8 billion. But reality is that property values have declined and our assessed valuation in Vanderbilt County has dropped to 6.9.
So in the 10 years prior to the referendum, we had 2.7 to 2.9% growth, an average over the 10-year period.
Correct.
The assumption then was 2.5 moving forward.
Correct.
How could the school district, and I'm asking a loaded question here, it's not possible, is it, to really look forward and find out that assessed valuation is going to drop 15%?
No one could have predicted the type of economic downturn that we experienced.
So let's talk about assessed valuation again.
Certainly.
So in 2011, had it stayed on that projection, we're at $8.8 billion, but rather we're dealing with about $6.9 billion. I mean, a dramatic, how does that affect a tax rate?
Certainly. When you look at the amount of levy or property tax funding that we were approved by the Department of Local Government Finance, when you look at the assessed valuation of $8.8 billion, that would have generated a property tax of 47 cents versus our property tax rate this year of 60 cents.
So a 13-cent difference.
Correct.
In tax rate just based on assessed valuation.
Correct.
There's also an assumption that if a tax rate goes up, that the school district is actually generating more revenue. And that's not necessarily true.
No, it isn't.
Yeah. Let's take a look. In fact, I think we have a graph looking at revenues in the EVSC. And what we have seen over the last 2 years in particular, we did see a spike in 1 year of overall revenues, but then dramatic drops. And actually, we're dealing today with revenue at about the 2007 levels.
Correct. When you look at the general fund budget, which is funded by the state, we were anticipating revenues of $142 million from the basic grant. Last year we had a reduction of those expected revenues by $6.5 million. This year we are receiving a reduction in anticipated revenues of $7.1 million. So over the course of this biennium budget, we will see a reduction in the general fund of $13.6 million. And as you alluded to earlier, that does return us to the revenue levels of 2007.
Can you explain in terms of total revenue, when the assessed valuation goes up, how a tax rate could go up, but the taxpayer may not actually pay more in taxes?
Certainly. When the Department of Local Government Finance certifies our budget, what they do then is certify the amount that you will be given in order to fund your budget, but then that is predicated upon the assessed valuation. So it's very conceivable that if the assessed valuation goes down, and to get the amount necessary to fund the budget, then your tax rate could go up. But it's more important, I think, to focus on the dollar amount, not the tax rate.
Because that means your tax rate would go up to generate the revenue, but the revenue doesn't change.
Right. Your tax rate would go up to generate the same amount of revenue.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction that often gets lost in that whole tax rate conversation. Who oversees the tax rate?
Great question. Actually, the entity, the governance portion of our entity, the school board, approves our budget. But they have no authority to set the budget nor the tax rate. All of that is done through a very rigid, stringent process overseen by the Department of Local Government Finance.
So school boards can't unilaterally increase their tax rate. So
No.
if you want more money in capital projects, you can't just approve a budget that adds 5 cents to the tax rate.
Absolutely cannot.
So that oversight is from the state level.
Correct.
And again, I think those are important distinctions for our viewers and our community to understand. I think, and I appreciate the work you're doing in helping people understand this. And obviously, when tax bills come out, people are concerned about it. So,
Absolutely.
well, thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you so
Smith.
much.
Coming up next in our EVSC Spotlight, 4 EVSC employees were recently recognized as the area's most outstanding educators. We'll tell you who they are up next.